Right, well, we are live.
Hello.
I am joined by, well, the first dude is Caleb Beers, and the next dude, and I'm pointing the wrong way, too, because I used to be on the opposite side. Wait a minute, I'm seeing myself in mirror image. This is not good.
I'm
a mirror. I'm a mirror. I'm Discord. Oh no, help.
And you're on the left side of the stream, so you're just pointing to the edge.
Yes, I am. I'm used to actually having myself viewing as not a mirror, because I captured Discord instead of.
Okay, I'm Caleb Beers. I'm a guest on this stream.
Yes.
Now, this guy is Mr. Steven Stutz, who you have seen before if you've watched Culling Sacred Cows, and this guy is Matthew Lina.
Yes, and the dude in the middle, I give you that. The dude in the middle is the host of the parlor, and the dude on your right, we are trying to bully, strong arm, and in any other conceivable way force him into doing a stream because he will be more successful than either of us. And I am your resident weirdo. Now that we've established all that, the reason I invited Mr. Beers was so that he could discuss the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
Indeed.
So
we're currently focused on Book 2, which you can find in the description. There's a link.
And I don't know how the resolution is, but I think that we should be able to see Book 2 on the stream, too. I put us at the bottom, and then the book is there. So, Mr. Beers, please do whatever it is that you wish to do. And please do limit yourself in ways that could potentially, or in ways that, from doing things that could get me banned.
Oh, you mean I can't pull out the, I can't show my vintage 70s porno collection on here?
No. I wouldn't,
No.
No strip teases, no porno collections. But the meditations would be good.
Okay. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. But I, who have seen the nature of the good, that it is beautiful, and of the bad, that it is ugly, and the nature of him who does wrong, that it is akin to me, not only of the same blood or seed, but that it participates in the same intelligence, and the same portion of the divinity, I can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him. Now, that part, no one can fix on me what is ugly, goes back to the Stoic conviction that the only good in life is virtue. Virtue. So nothing can hurt you unless it makes you a worse person, and it can only make you a worse person if you allow it to. So all of these people you cannot blame for doing what they do because they're ignorant, although you can argue that perhaps they should have known. And they cannot hurt you either, because they can't make you be like them. I now cede the floor to the two gracious hosts, or my gracious host and his other guest. Yes. Might want to move your microphone back down if you're going to talk.
I just said the other weirdo. So nor can you be angry with your kinsman nor hate him. So would you please expound a bit on that?
Oh yes, it's quite simple. You see a dog, and the dog eats its own crap or its own vomit. Let's go with that. The dog eats its own vomit. You can't really blame the dog for doing that because it's too dense to do anything else.
Hanlon's razor comes to mind for this passage.
Right. Likewise, you cannot blame people for being stupid and vicious in the sense of full of vice, because they cannot do otherwise. The best you can do is try to shepherd them in the right direction without becoming like them. And there's a passage further on that says, "Consider that men would do the same thing nonetheless, although thou shouldst burst." Meaning, you could get so angry you would explode, and they would keep doing this. So there's really no point in being angry.
And this is a constant problem that I find myself running into. So if you will kindly flagellate me with your words, I would be indebted to you.
Oh, well, better yet, I can flagellate you with Marcus Aurelius's words.
Oh, sounds like a good idea. Would you care to continue?
Sure. Let me find the exact passage. This one is in Book 4, which can be found on the same site.
Okay.
It's just the next ones that came to mind.
Okay.
I'm going to go into the text-only version so I can search it. Men seek retreats for themselves. Allah is at a family lunch, darn it. Anyway, men seek retreats for themselves. Houses in the country, seashores and mountains. And thou too art wont to desire such things very much. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men. For it is in thy power... Shut up! For it is in thy power... See, there I go, getting irate for no reason.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yes, we're demonstrating how vicious we are here on stream.
We are. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men. For it is in thy power whenever thou shalt choose to retire into thyself. For nowhere, either with more quiet or more freedom from trouble, does a man retire than into his own soul, particularly when he has within him such thoughts that by looking into them, he is immediately in perfect tranquillity. And I affirm that tranquillity is nothing else than the good ordering of the mind. Constantly then give to thyself this retreat and renew thyself, and let thy principles be brief and fundamental, which, as soon as thou shalt recur to them, will be sufficient to cleanse the soul completely, and to send thee back free from all discontent with the things to which thou returnest. For with what art thou discontented? With the badness of men? Recall to thy mind this conclusion, that rational animals exist for one another, and that to endure is a part of justice, and that men do wrong involuntarily. And consider how many already, after mutual enmity, suspicion, hatred, and fighting, have been stretched dead, reduced to ashes, and be quiet at last. But perhaps thou art dissatisfied with that which is assigned to thee out of the universe. Recall to thy recollection this alternative. Either there is providence or atoms, fortuitous occurrences of things, or remember the arguments by which it has been proved that the world is a kind of political community, and be quiet at last. But perhaps corporeal things will still fasten upon thee. Consider then further that the mind mingles not with the breath, whether moving gently or violently, when it has once drawn itself apart and discovered its own power. And think also of all that thou hast heard and assented to about pain and pleasure, and be quiet at last. But perhaps the desire of the thing called fame will torment thee. See how soon everything is forgotten, and look at the chaos of infinite time on each side of the present, and the emptiness of applause, and the changeableness and want of judgment in those who pretend to give praise, and the narrowness of the space within which it is circumscribed, and be quiet at last. For the whole earth is a point, and how small a nook in it is thy dwelling, and how few there are in it, and of what kind of people are they who will praise thee. Take away thy opinion, and then there is taken away the complaint, I have been harmed. Take away the complaint, I have been harmed, and the harm taken away. That which does not make a man worse than he was, also does not make his life worse, nor does it harm him, either from without or within. The nature of that which is universally useful has been compelled to do this. Do not have such an opinion of things as he has who does thee wrong, or such as he wishes thee to have, but look at them as they are in truth. So there are some extra ways of looking at it that can all sort of play off of each other to help solve this problem.
And still, ultimately, it boils down to an act of the will to go about doing so.
It does.
I mean, it's one thing to sit and say, "Do not have such an opinion of things as he who has done thee wrong, or such as he wishes thee to have, but look at them as they are in truth." I would actually say, "or such as he wishes thee to have," is even, well, obviously that's called playing right into the hands of the person who is screwing with you in whatever way he happens to be screwing
And the
with
point
you.
of these aphorisms is to make it easier to do that act of the will. That's why he calls for you to have your principles on hand, because if you remind yourself of them, you see how stupid what you're doing is, and you'll back off from it. Or that's the hope. And that's why he was writing all this to himself. He wants himself to remember all this. Aurelius is telling himself, remember these things when you're getting pissed off at people for being stupid, vicious, fat, ugly, lazy, busybodies, arrogant, ungrateful, etc.
I see.
And I don't claim to be some kind of stoic paladin. I smoke cigarettes on it, obviously, and I do a number of other things. And I'm far from perfect, but I think that if we all remind each other of these principles in a way that isn't sanctimonious, we'll be better off.
I agree.
So you're not even going necessarily for perfection, but just for slight improvement upon reality.
Constant slight improvement.
Right. Because if you chase perfection, that's quite obviously fruitless.
Right.
And I think,
well, chase perfection and never expect to reach it.
Right. If you chase it with the expectation of reaching it.
And then
I think
additionally...
that's a flaw in itself.
And then additionally, when we talk about chasing perfection, perhaps not overreaching in terms of sticking with, I don't know if tangible is necessarily the word to use here, but for lack of too much else to say, I would say tangible, measurable, even though one can say lots of things are qualitative, you can at least say whether something exists or not. Right? So for example, deciding that, okay, I'm going to refrain from doing something hurtful or bad, or I'm going to actually go and do something that is good, and then just consistently doing that on a daily basis.
And knowing that you're going to fail at many, many points, and then going back and trying again regardless and not giving up.
Yeah. It's seemingly a small step, but it's infinitely more than the person who has a whole bunch of high-flown goals that he goes full speed and tries to achieve, and then falls flat on his face and doesn't do anything after that.
Right. The idea is to keep on ripping yourself off the floor after you face plant and doing it again, knowing you're going to face plant again and again and again. And part of what I want to speak about here is detachment from results. you want to act for the best results. You want to act to achieve the best results possible. But you want to be emotionally detached from the results. You want to be able to fail completely, feel absolutely nothing from it. And this is speaking in ideal terms, obviously this is not quite attainable. You want to be able to fail completely, feel absolutely no disappointment, and go back to trying again or trying something else good.
Or to be able to feel the disappointment, but then not channel it in any negative sort of a way, but just use it as motivation to do better the next time.
Yes.
So, for example, if one, was ruining stupid people who break bottles on the sidewalk or the asphalt or someplace, or if one was just lamenting the existence of stupidity and stupid people, or if one is, I don't know, just insert hypothetical situation here. These sorts of things do, or can, as you said earlier, just having them exist can help. And
Right.
they serve as constant reality checks of, oh boy, yeah, I guess I'm really not all that virtuous.
And one good way to do it is with these stoic questions. My favorites are, which ones are they? Did you expect? Would you have it? It was did you expect and would you have it are the two that you can use on yourself. Did you expect, for example, if your car breaks down, did you expect to own a car and never have any problems with it? Or, let's say, Yes. Or someone else isn't cooperating with you. Well, would you have it that everyone else were a robot who just did whatever you told them?
Yes.
Did you expect and would you have it? Well, yeah, that's because you're fucking crazy, but... No, but anyway... It is the case. Would you have it that you floated in perfect bliss forever with no work to do and no interesting challenges? I wouldn't. Did you expect and would you have it? And one that you can use on other people is did I say? It's especially good if someone threatens you. Or if someone... What's a good example of this? If someone criticizes you. You're short. Did I say I was tall? Because while we don't want to have our egos dictating, our estimation of other people's opinion of us dictating our actions, at the same time, you want to demonstrate, you want to be an exemplar of virtues because because virtue can be contagious in a good way. And you don't have to peacock it, but you just act in a way that makes it obvious what your motives and intentions are. Did I say I was tall? Well, I'll slap you in the face. Did I say that did I say I was impossible to slap? Is it bizarre? Yeah, it'll throw people off. Another one is just agreeing with people. If you knew me, you could say much worse things than that. I've used that before.
There's the, I don't know if either of you are familiar with Dave Ramsey, but I was linked one of his videos where he was talking about how to deal with stupid people. And he mentioned, apparently this dude is some sort of finance guy, but he mentioned the bobblehead technique, which is basically whenever you find yourself, and he explicitly mentioned a family Thanksgiving gathering, but just insert just insert relevant situation here. That smile and nod, just smile and nod.
Yes, that works too.
But then, did I say that seems like that's a very good If one were to try to push the situation in a particular direction, that could be very useful.
Right. If someone is being that way and you've decided that that it would be more productive to call them on their BS, and there are times, you don't have to be totally passive. Stoics are passive more often than not, because it usually doesn't accomplish anything to make a big deal out of it. But if you decide that someone needs to be called on their BS, did I say is a good way to do it.
So how would you use this, say, if you're caught in an argument with somebody about an emotionally sensitive topic? How would you do that without being or unnecessarily turning yourself into the catalyst that would cause someone to blow his top?
Well, in the first place, I think you need to be absolutely, or well, you can't be absolutely, but you need to be as sure as you possibly can be that you're in the right. And the way to do that is by cultivating virtue in everyday life. It's sort of like if you're losing your gut. You can't spot reduce body fat. You can't just lose your gut and leave the rest of your fat the same. The only way to lose that spare tire is to reduce your overall body fat. And the way to claim the moral high ground, it's much easier if you actually have it. And it's much easier to have the high ground in that situation if you have it in general. So be the best person you can be, first of all, and that's, the groundwork for this. But in that specific case, what I would say is two things. First of all, you can disguise the did I say differently. You could effectively ask them the did I say question without saying it outright like that and causing them to blow their top. The other strategy is go ahead and say it and let them blow their top. Weather the storm. Let them fling all kinds of abuse at you, sticks and stones, etc. It can't make you worse. And then once they've done that, you just go ahead and continue and keep pushing until they run out of energy. If you're calm and the other guy's freaking out, it's like in wrestling. If you've done any grappling in martial arts, you know that if you're holding somebody down and they're struggling and you're just holding them down with your weight, they're fighting harder than you are and they'll get tired first. If somebody's blowing up on you and you're calm, you'll outlast them as long as you can resist the temptation to freak out in response.
Mm-hmm.
Interested in knowing, because Stephen, you said you hadn't read the Meditations, and
Nope.
I had read them a few times before I met Caleb, and then after meeting Caleb, they came up in conversation. I read them again, but still, every single time that I read them, they hit me just due to the fact that, well, probably my memory isn't all that good, and then also the fact that I'm not a particularly virtuous person. So, at the risk of exposing even more of my viciousness to others, I would wonder if Caleb has any others that he would like to fling my way, so that he doesn't have to target any other viewer. Or, I mean, if you want to put yourself as the target of Caleb coming up with something apt, then I'm fine with that too. But I was just thinking, if Caleb, if you have something that you think that Marcus Aurelius would want to say to me, what do you think that he would say?
All the stuff about the bit about do wrong to thyself, my soul, but thou wilt no longer have the opportunity of honoring thyself. That part. Now, I think I'm going to take a second tack here. What would Marcus Aurelius say to you? Well, I'll do you, and then I'm going to say read the part that I think is what he would say to me. Caleb is going to fling some poo at Caleb.
Okay. If that makes it more palatable or whatever, or if it makes it more real, then do. The floor is yours.
All right, let's see here.
Which book is this from?
Well, for you, remember to, on every occasion which leads to to vexation.
Which book is this from?
This is from book. Click the text document at the top. It'll give you one big text, and you can Control F to get it.
Well, I could do that, but that's going to mess up with the screen capture.
Let me try and find the title of this particular chapter. Just scroll up. Book 4.
Okay, book 4, and then it says,
remember to, on every occasion which leads thee to vexation, to apply this principle. Not that this is a misfortune, but that to bear it nobly is a good fortune.
I see.
Now, as for what he would say to me, this is what I think he would say to me. In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world? Or have I been made for this, to lie in the bedclothes and keep myself warm?
Which one was this from?
Book 5. Sorry to jump around so much.
Okay.
This will be the whole paragraph.
Okay. I have it right here
In
for
the
our
morning-
readers.
And this is what he would say to me. In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I am going to do the things for which I exist and for which I was brought into the world? Or have I been made for this, to lie in the bedclothes and keep myself warm? But this is more pleasant. Dost thou exist then to take thy pleasure and not at all for action or exertion? Dost thou not see the little plants, the little birds, the ants, the spiders, the bees working together to put in order their several parts of the universe? And art thou unwilling to do the work of a human being, and dost thou not make haste to do that which is according to thy nature? But it is necessary to take rest also. It is necessary, however, nature has fixed bounds to this too. She has fixed bounds both to eating and drinking, and yet thou goest beyond these bounds, beyond what is sufficient. Yet in thy acts it is not so, but thou stoppest short of what thou canst do. So if thou lovest not thyself, for if thou didst, so thou lovest not thyself, for if thou didst, thou wouldst love thy nature and her will. But those who love their several arts exhaust themselves in working at them unwashed and without food. But thou valuest thy own nature less than the turner values the turning art, or the dancer the dancing art, or the lover of money values his money, or the vainglorious man his little glory. And such men, when they have a violent affection to a thing, choose neither to eat nor to sleep, rather than to perfect the things for which they care. But are the acts which concern society more vile in thy eyes and less worthy of thy labor? That's because I'm a lazy fuck.
That applies really well to me too.
I guess that kind of, it makes sense.
So, yes, that's what I think he would say to me.
Oh yeah, I'm only jesting. Says, what would he say to Stephen?
I don't know. I'm not sure I know you well enough. In all honesty.
I think what you just said, what you just detailed, applies pretty well to me. I've been prone to sort of, if I don't like something or I see it as beneath me, not necessarily in a virtuous sense, but in a
Vain
like
sense?
in a what?
In the terms of vanity?
Not even vanity, but as far as like, if I felt as though I already, like, the thing that comes to mind is school often, where they'll give out, say, work that I'm just like, I already understand these things. I don't need to do this. And it is a sort of I guess that is sort of vanity in a sense, where it's like, well, why would I be doing something that I already understand or something like that? And instead of just, okay, because it actually will in the end benefit me, if not intellectually, it will benefit me as far as my, say, grade in the class. If I do the homework, I get a better grade.
And you don't have to pretend that the class should be that way.
Exactly. And I'm very prone to doing that. I'm very prone to doing that. I'm prone to just sort of, acting as though every class is supposed to be full, like, be perfect for me the whole way through. And then that is vain, and it is self-centered in the sense that, well, then what about other people, etc. Like,
right.
If they catered the class to me, what happens to everyone else, etc. And I can't expect everything to just be like that. And if I'm really that and that's sort of the main. That's why I think that one applies a lot to me. I don't really get too bothered with other people. Like, I suppose you guys, I think, get a little bit more. Just, I don't know. I've always been able to detach pretty easily from other people, or just like, okay, whatever, that's how they are. But as far as my own enemy being myself, essentially, in that sort of circumstance, that really reverberates with me.
There we go. And I think there's a 3-stage progression you can go through. There's a 3-stage progression you can go through. The level where you tolerate bullshit because you're okay with it and you shouldn't be okay with it. Then you get to where you don't tolerate bullshit because you're not okay with it. Then you get to the level where if you can't stop it from happening, you tolerate the bullshit even though you're not okay with it.
Right, and yeah, that's where I feel myself. I used to be much more, when I was young. I mean, like, I was a lot worse. I would just, if something did not feel right to me or did not feel just. I'll look back to when I was little and my mom said no to me. I was 2 years old and I was like, no is not the answer. Like, I was very, I literally said those exact words to my mom. I just didn't tolerate it. If something didn't seem just or I didn't understand why something was the case, there was just no even sense of toleration. And then slowly, I became more aware of the things I shouldn't be tolerating throughout the years, basically not through trial and error, as far as, like, I wasn't going out to try, but it was happening inadvertently. Like, no matter what, you're going to figure out, like, okay, well, this is how things are and it's shitty. And at first, upon first realization of that, you might kind of lock up and be like, okay, I don't want to deal with this at all because I can see how bad this is. But then once you realize that it is a force that you can't exactly fight, it's in your best interest to just deal with it and tolerate it and try to go, and basically try to work towards the best outcome for yourself, whether that be maybe slowly changing the system that you're in while still maintaining, yourself, essentially, or just basically dealing with the system and going full force trying to, okay, well, let me just maximize what I can get out of it. And depending on how much, like, how important it is to you, for example, with like Matt's schooling thing, like, I really agree that like I think school's just done so poorly, and that is something that's not something I exactly just want to rest and like leave be. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I could just get through it and then go off, but then I realize there are other people in schools, and, like, there's other people who would be experiencing the same thing as I am, for example. And it might be good. It might be good for me to continue to say, put the word out there, etc. Basically, preach what I think about the system. And everyone who's watching this, I'm sure, knows how we feel about school, at least how it's currently done. So, in that sense, one might argue, oh, well, you're wasting your time. It's a huge system. But like, if your values align that strongly, or your values are crossed that strongly by a certain thing, it's not wrong to try to change it, I say, as well. So I think it is up to your judgment whether you choose the route to ignore or to at least slowly change, etc.
Right. There we go. And I think, like in my case, it has been very different. I'm the kind of person who will tend to put up with all kinds of things that I really shouldn't put up with. And the big part of that, part of it is weakness, but in all honesty, a big part of it is that early on in life, it took me a long time to
Right, you're
realize
just
that
used to
people
it.
were not doing things because they thought it was right, and that when they said that, they were just rationalizing. Like Aurelius says, most people have not seen the nature of the good, that it is beautiful, and the bad, that it is ugly. Most people aren't even aware of whether or not what they're doing is right or not. What they're doing is a mixture of whatever they feel like doing right now and trying to get what they want.
Right,
The
it's
question of
rational.
whether it's right, the question of whether it's right doesn't occur to people a lot, except as a justification, and
Right.
it just sort of supervenes uh, on their interests. The question of whether or not it's right as a completely separate thing doesn't occur to most people for the most part, and realizing that was a shock to me. Maybe it does occur to them every once in a while. If they've done something really shitty, they'll notice. But for the most part, they're excellent at ignoring the ethical ramifications of what they've done, or what they're planning on doing, or what they're saying. And for me, realizing that about people, that how much they are that way, was a big shock, and it gave me, in my mind, I thought, well, okay, since they're not doing that, it makes it okay for me to do X, Y, and Z in order to get them to back off.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was always under the impression, oh, they must know something that I don't know.
Yeah.
Because they keep saying that their way is the right way. But then when I realized that they're just trying to get what they want, I thought, well, okay. In that case, it's completely okay for me to do things, for example, like getting in someone's face to get them motivated.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely okay for me to call the BMV up when they didn't send that refund check for a ticket I was not supposed to get, and bug them about it until I get it in the mail.
Right.
And, I would thank Mr. Lina here for that in large part. Because, I mean, just, talking to you, Matt, was a big part of my realization about exactly how people work. And the thought that it's, yes, part of getting what you want out of people, or getting them to do what they should be doing, is jumping down their throats to some extent, or refusing to give them what they want. And it's okay to do that because they're acting, for the most part, either in self-interest or just for no reason at all.
And I'll be the first to say it's exhausting. If you have goals in mind, it would make sense to be able to progress seamlessly from A to B to C. But rarely is it ever that simple. I mean, certainly there are systems in place, and I suppose that's why rich people hire lawyers. Is because, seriously, you wind up having personal assistants and you have lawyers. Their job is to wade through BS. I mean, there are professions for people who will wade through the BS for people that have better things to do.
All right.
And and that's why I would say that many lawyers are quite admirable, and any personal assistant that can do her job well is amazing.
They're in the trenches, man. I mean, if I would, even if I were paying them, if I had a secretary or personal assistant, I would make it a point to express my gratitude on a regular basis, and probably get them gifts occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
Especially because being my secretary would be like herding a fucking cat.
I'm sure. Hey, I mean, 40% over market price would be the bare minimum.
Yes.
I think a really apt, basically real life situation of this sort of thing is how you see how people treat wait staff, for example, or just basically people in service or in service industries
Oh yes.
Like what is someone's attitude towards those people? And you'll see some people, the trend I notice is older people in particular, and I think this is actually an artifact of our culture and the respect your elders thing. And like old people sometimes get this sort of, or older people sometimes get this like entitled thing, just because they've been on the earth longer, and they'll kind of treat, if their order isn't right or just some silly like banal thing, they'll like just freak out or flip shit, right? And they're like, "Oh, I'm being blah," and it's that they, any inconvenience to them is like some sort of like, it's like unjust on an ego, on like the level of their ego almost. It's like, "Oh, you dare
It's
treat me like
unjust
that?"
because I didn't get what I wanted.
Exactly, and it's exactly respect because
It's
they didn't get what they
petulant.
wanted in there.
They can't, but that's because they're ignorant. They can't tell the difference between justice and getting what they want.
Exactly, right. And knowing this, that's basically my point, is that knowing this makes it easier to deal with that sort of thing.
Because you can give up trying to convince them because you realize they can't see the difference unless they take it upon themselves to become better. They're never going to be able to realize there's a difference between justice and getting what I want.
Right.
And so at that point, like, for example, that's why I'm an ethical consequentialist in many ways. I think it's okay to manipulate people sometimes.
That's fair.
Because if they can't tell the difference between those things, then I need to lead them by the nose into what they should be doing. Is
Right.
that, condescending of me? Maybe, but it is what I do.
Right.
That's all I can say. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No. It's completely fair.
And, to assuage anyone's doubts if they're watching this and thinking that I'm a condescending, sanctimonious, pompous prick, well, first of all, yes, I am. Second of all, I have spent a great deal of my life assuming everyone else was right and I'm wrong, so I have been on the other side of that. Trust me, I've tried to see it from their perspective intensely, and this is what I've come up with.
Yeah, they're clueless. The wise people that go and tell you that share their wisdom. It's certainly, I believe that just for being able to make it through life for a long time, especially in older days, was a respectable thing, because there are things that could kill you. But now, no,
Yeah. No.
anyone can accidentally make it to old age. But still, even so,
Right.
even
That's a really good
so,
point.
even so, they might have gleaned some wisdom along the way, and I'm sure most have. Those ones that have gleaned wisdom are also likely to be more quiet, because
Yep.
they don't. One of the things about advice giving that I've discovered, and I don't know if you've discovered the same thing, but it's if someone is giving advice, it's rarely for the benefit of the other person. It is so that if the advice is followed, somehow it gives validation to the giver.
Yes.
If you,
Or
if,
because that's the self-interested. It can also be done for no reason at all, because I felt like saying that.
well, that's just one step lower in stupidity, and actually one step lower, or one step higher in how benign it is. One is just words escaping one's mouth with no reason except for to talk, and the other is words escaping one's mouth with no reason except for to try to convince
Validate
someone to do
themselves.
things exactly the way that I would do them. Now, of course, there are people that are very successful whose words are worth a great deal. I don't think that it would be right for me to name names here, but there are a few people in my life whose words, growing up, whose words meant a lot more to me than the words of other people. And I'm referring now to people outside of my family. My family, I
Me too.
I
I'm thinking of
respect
the
them
same
all,
people.
but there are a handful of other people whose words are actually worth something. And they didn't have any familial incentive to share them with me. But they're people in whose basements I spent weekends building model airplanes. They're people with whom I spent Thursdays having Bible studies and talking business. They're people with whom I've had some of the most fun and some of the most serious conversations. And they were not stingy in their advice giving. They were very, very generous. But I don't think that they were just spouting advice at every turn. I think they waited for people who would actually, who they knew would actually take it seriously. They were very good at not throwing their pearls before swine. Which is another great aphorism.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that aphorism. Could you explain exactly what it means?
Do not.
It's from the New Testament.
Yes. Do not cast your sacred things to dogs, or your pearls before swine, for they will trample them underfoot.
Okay.
And then turn on you and tear you to pieces. So, of course, if you're thinking swine, it would be then the wild boars. Don't throw your pearls before wild boars, because they won't value them. They'll just trample them on, and then you're dead. Right? Throwing pearls at boars is not going to stop them from goring you.
Yeah. All right, that makes sense.
Right.
I just thought I would let you know there's 13 more minutes left in the first hour, and the plan for the second hour is to be doing a little bit of reading from the Underground History of American Education, and having a conversation. And I would say, Caleb, you're welcome to remain. You're welcome to leave at will. It's entirely up to you. But I just thought I'd let you know we got about 13 minutes left of the first hour.
Okay, I will depart in terms of video, but I'll keep the stream open and return to it periodically.
Okay.
I still don't have a core to answer today, and I really need to get back on my Kant series.
Okay. So, do you still have 12 more minutes to spare of talking a bit about the meditations?
Absolutely, absolutely. And one moment, I want to like this stream so it'll show up on my Twitter. Okay, it looks like I did.
Okay. Sounds great. So here I am at book 5. If I recall correctly, and this is how bad my memory is. Yes. I'm starting to read from the beginning of book 3. We ought to consider not only that our life is daily wasting away, and a smaller part of it is left, but another thing also must be taken into the account, that if a man should live longer, it is quite uncertain whether the understanding will still continue sufficient for the comprehension of things, and retain the power of contemplation which strives to acquire the knowledge of the divine in the human. For if he shall begin to fall into dotage, perspiration, and nutrition, and imagination, and appetite, and whatever else there is of the kind, will not fail, but the power of making use of ourselves and filling up the measure of our duty, and clearly separating all appearances, and considering whether a man should now depart from life, and whatever else of the kind absolutely requires a disciplined reason, all this is already extinguished. We must make haste, then, not only because we are daily nearer to death, but also because the conception of things and the understanding of them cease first. So to make it even more immediate for those of us who are considerably younger, and for those of us that aren't anywhere near our expected life time, those of us that haven't drawn too near to our life expectancy, we could get hit by a truck. We could be paralyzed. We could have brain damage. We could all sorts of things could happen to us, and the likelihood that they will have happened increases as our age goes up. So, keeping death in the forefront of our minds, almost as a gauge of value, is a very important thing to do. Because ultimately, as I believe he says in Book 4, don't live. Is it, Caleb, in Book 4 that he says something about not living like as if you're going to live 10,000 years?
Right. And then he goes on to say, even if you were, it wouldn't matter.
Yes, and especially because if you have a long life, then you have no incentive to make the most of today, because there's always tomorrow. Death is what gives significance to what happens in this very short time frame that we get to spend here on Earth.
Right.
Which brings us back to I think the very first topic we ever discussed, or any first really serious topic we ever discussed, which was contemplation of death. I think we disposed of pleasantries quite quickly and immediately started talking about important things like dying and significance. And then education. We talked about education. So, in what way, Caleb, has being cognizant of your own mortality and the fact that you are... there's a very, very, very high likelihood that you are limited in your days on this earth, how has that affected you?
Well, let me tell you a bit of a story. And this is kind of a funny story.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point where, due to some circulation issues, which I, managed to get around by cutting down on how much I was smoking, I was experiencing some fairly severe pain in my balls. And at the time, I didn't realize what it was. And believe me, if there's anything that will make you cut down on your cigarettes, it's that. At the time, I didn't know what it was. I really didn't know. And I thought, what if I have testicular cancer? And I was at work, and I went through this vivid fantasy in my head where I was diagnosed. And, it was this... When I speculate about the future, I often fantasize as a means of doing so. And I was thinking... And the doctor tells me this and tells me to get my affairs in order, and I go home. When I get home, what do? I write like a motherfucker because I don't have much time left. Now, I didn't have testicular cancer, but when I got home from work, you better believe I began to write as much as I could.
Why do you write?
Because I'm good at it.
Okay.
And it's worthwhile. And I think it's worthwhile because I think if I articulate things that everybody kind of knows instinctively but can't say out loud the right way, if I articulate them, then maybe... I think it'll do good. I think taking basic truths that everyone knows but can't articulate, because if everyone knows the truth and can't articulate, it's very easy for it to be covered up and forgotten by means of a lie. But if people have the power to say it, then that can't happen because they can articulate it, and the lie can't happen because it stands in opposition to an obvious, articulate truth.
Did not
and
the
maybe
ancients...
if I say it, if I keep saying it and keep on saying these things over and over and write them as crystal clear as possible from every different angle, maybe that will make it harder for people to lie.
Did not the ancients emphasize rhetoric
Yes. Aristotle wrote a book on it. I have it.
Which, by the way, if anyone is interested in learning to do public speaking, you don't need any of the new stuff.
Public speaking works the same way now as it did thousands of years ago. The only difference is that the forum, the agora, the stoa is Greek for porch. It's where the Stoics gathered and where they got their name, Stoa. That's right here on your screen right now. This is where it happens now.
Yep.
And I think it's only fair that I would give a big hat tip to you, Caleb, because it's quite likely that if it weren't for you, I would definitely not be streaming. And it is highly unlikely that I would be making any kind of YouTube videos that I would make public to anyone. You know, I share things with my family and I share things with my friends and so on, but it's very unlikely that I would have done anything, simply because you persuaded me that important things are worth saying at a point when I was essentially reaching out for someone to convince me of that very fact. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I wouldn't be streaming.
My job.
That's for certain.
Mm-hmm. Doing things that are intrinsically good is a good enough reason. Of course, then that assumes morality, which I suppose leads into a recurrent theme of the parlor, which is taking a dump on modernism.
Exactly.
Well, in the meantime,